Sayonara for now.
I went to convey my best wishes for Christmas to my dear friend Carlo, a man of my own age, who lived with his family in a flat in the Parioli district. This has become a habit. During the year we do not see one another, but at Christmas I go to convey my best wishes. Dear Carlo, we were together in our youth, and then we lost sight of one another. But 10 years ago we met again, when I was 50 and he was 50. And since then, every Christmas, I go and give him my best wishes. It is a habit, as I said, and judging at least from the way in which he welcomes me, it is a habit not only for me, but by this time for him also. As I was saying, on Christmas Eve I left home to go and give him my best wishes. I live in the suburbs, and I do not hesitate to admit that my house is very different from Carlo's. Call it a hut rather than a house, and you will have a pretty exact idea of it. Standing among a great many other huts with its back against the wall of the Mondrione aqueduct, my hut is not lacking in the indispensable conveniences. A little minor, but arranged, as a lavatory, a cooking stove with gas cylinder, a floor made out of real bricks, a window with panes of real glass, a roof of real tiles. How long have I lived in this hut? That is a mystery. How did I come to be there? Another mystery. Where did I live before? Yet another. Anyhow, even if I've lost my memory, it doesn't mean that I'm nobody. I am called, or rather, they call me, Tullio. And if someone in that conglomeration of huts calls out, Professor, it is I who turn around to answer, and no one else. Professor of what, I do not remember, but professor it is, nonetheless. Christmas Eve was a really unpleasant day, with a combination rare in Rome of cold and damp, of frost and rain. My wife Evelina herself wrapped a woolen scarf around my neck, fastened the top button of my overcoat, and placed an umbrella in my hand. The scarf was full of holes. The overcoat had a tear in the shape of a Z right on the chest, and it was one of the ribs of the umbrella that stuck out rebelliously. Why, I said, do I have to dress in rags like this? Tell me why. To arouse pity, she answered. And remember to say that your wife is in a hospital with a serious illness. Don't forget. I said nothing. I shrugged my shoulders and went out into the pouring rain. In the bus, I sat behind a widow, all dimmed with rain, my umbrella between my legs, my face turned towards the pane of glass. What was I thinking about? I was thinking about that thing that had brought Carlo and me together again, and it was precisely that thing which can bring together two men of different financial status, and that is culture. And this was what Evelina, with her incredibly uncouth, elementary, and illiterate personality, was unable to understand. According to her, when I went to see Carlo, I ought to put my hand out imploringly, as professional beggars do, charity for the love of God, that a man should turn to another for help in the name of cultural solidarity that she could not understand. For her, the only relationship between myself and Carlo could be the relationship between the rich man and the poor man, between the man who doles out charity and the man who receives it. Yet it was not like that. Carlo and I had been together in our younger days, working side by side in some important cause, in something of benefit to humanity, and something cultural, in fact. What this thing was, in which, as equals, we had collaborated and for which we had struggled, I was quite unable to recall, owing to my usual feebleness of memory. That there had been such a thing, however, there could be no possible doubt. Otherwise, when I had made myself known to Carlo 10 years before, why had he not cried out, "Get away, I don't know you, I've never seen you"? The trouble, however, was not that merely I did not know what we had done together in our younger days, but logically I did not know who he was, nor what he did. I knew only that he was called Carlo, the name which I had addressed him when I had met him 10 years before, and which must be his correct name, because he had made no protest. Moreover, I had tried several times, with delicacy and caution, to discover his surname and profession, but I had never made any progress. I ought to have asked him this at the beginning, frankly admitting my loss of memory. Now, after 10 years, it was far too late. At this point I said to myself that today I would make a last attempt, goodness me. I could not go on like this, accepting clothes, money, and food once a year without knowing who was giving them to me and in the name of what. Of course, I must not offend his sensibilities by letting him think that for 10 years I had been play-acting. But today, unobtrusively, today I must. Yes, I must arrive at the truth. This decision made me feel better, to such a degree that I purposely left the bus, the umbrella with the rebellious rib, and once I was in the street, I pulled from my neck the tattered scarf, another stimulus to the compassion, and I threw it into the gutter. I did not wish to arouse pity. I did not want charity. I wanted to meet, as man to man, friend to friend, and recall together the days of our youth, and our glorious collaboration. I reached the building in which he lived, which, alas, had no porter. I went up to the lift and came to his door, which, alas, had no nameplate. While the maid went to look for him, I looked around in the entrance hall in hope of seeing something from which I might at least deduce his profession, but no, there was nothing. A console table with a looking-glass, 4 chairs, a few framed prints, an umbrella stand. Truly a mysterious man, a man who concealed, but for what purpose? His own personality. And yet, when he came in, there were the usual greetings. "Carlo, I've come to wish you a happy Christmas. Allow me to embrace you. Oh, good old Tullio, I'm delighted to see you. Thank you for coming." We were silent for a moment, looking at one another. Then, not without some embarrassment, I said, "Listen, Carlo, let's go for a moment into your study. I have something to say to you." You must note that I said study deliberately. If he had a study, I was already one step forward, for it would mean that he had studied something. Otherwise, he would have answered, "I haven't a study. I have a laboratory, a consulting room, a library," and then I should have known that he was a scientist, a doctor, a man of letters. But he said nothing. After looking at me for a moment in a strange manner, he merely invited me, by a gesture, towards one of the doors in the entrance hall. I went in, and I found myself in a nondescript sitting room. He pointed to an armchair, sat down opposite to me, and looked at me again with the air of a man prepared to listen. More and more embarrassed, I said, "Carlo, I'm a professor. At least that's what they call me." "Yes, I know." "You know me, Carlo. You know that culture has been and is my specialty." "Yes, you told me that too." "What would humanity be without culture, Carlo? A gray mass, in which the only differences would be those of money. You who are rich and I who am poor, you who give charity and I who receive it. Fortunately, there is culture." "Yes, fortunately." And so, our relationship is not that of a rich man and a poor man, but that of 2 men who in their youth have struggled together, have collaborated, have joined forces in order to attain a common cultural end. Well said. I became suddenly aware that I had not yet accomplished anything. I tried to press him closely. You had the success in which any case you deserved," I said. "I, on the other hand, yet just the same. When I see you again, it seems to me that only yesterday we were carrying out our experiments together in the same laboratory." He didn't blink an eyelid. "Yes," he said, "to me it seems only yesterday, too." I was conscious that I had started to sweat under my heavy overcoat from embarrassment. I felt like I had made a mistake, and corrected myself. That we were working in the same library," I said. "Yes, that's it. I meant to say that we collaborated in the writing of that text Yes, Tullio, he said, what you say is true. Our collaboration only lasted a short time, Carlo. Nevertheless, it can't be denied that we contributed to a degree that was perhaps not altogether contemptible, but to the progress of humanity. I looked at him. He was listening to me with half-closed eyes. I went on. I, myself, Carlo, am of course no longer what I once was, yet these memories reawaken old enthusiasms in me. Ah, well, Carlo, we were a well-assorted couple. You remember when we published our... Uh, you know, that thing we wrote together. You remember what an effect, and in fact, what a scandal. Oh, Carlo, culture advances by scandals of that kind. Inevitably, every discovery endangers assured positions, established interests, conservative altitudes. But we did not shrink, eh, Carlo? We did not hesitate. I realized that I did not know what more to say. My head was empty and I was damp with sweat. He, on the other hand, was calm and reserved, as he watched me without speaking. We remained silent for a moment. Then he looked at his watch and said, Well, I'm sorry, but I have things to do. Thank you for coming to wish me a happy Christmas, and I wish the same to you with all my heart. And now this young lady will show you out. And he indicated the maid, who it seemed had been standing there beside the door during the whole of our conversation. And she will give you the usual Christmas parcel. Bewildered, I rose to my feet and cried, I do not want any parcels from someone who stole my idea and passed it off on his own and succeeded in making a career for himself by those means. It was a last attempt to dislodge him, to force him to say who he was, by implication who I was. But alas, I had to deal with a type of man that did not easily betray himself. Coldly, he said, Ah, so that's how it is it? But when you telephoned this morning, you did not think of it like that. Well, I've changed my mind. Oh, never mind. Louisa, show this gentleman to the door, will you? So I found myself outside the flat again, and went down, in bewilderment, to the street. It was raining cats and dogs, the rain was cold, and it cleared my mind. I went in again, took the lift, and rang the door. Louisa came. A happy Christmas to you. Have you anything for a poor old man who lives in a hut and whose wife is in hospital? She said nothing. She vanished, and in a short time came back with a big brown paper parcel tied up with a string. Here you are, she said. I did it up myself with my own hands. There's a complete suit and 2 bottles and some assorted sweets. Is that all right? Thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, best wishes. But in the street, as I walked along hurriedly in the rain, I said to myself, what was the point in telling the truth? You were so-and-so, I am so-and-so. At least, now I should know who he is, and, above all, who I am myself. You Know Me, Carlo, by Alberto Moravia.